Pulling a blade from a wound without thinking could cause heavy bleeding.
Hold it!
You say doing it without thinking could be a problem. Does that mean that if you used due care and attention, it would be alright? I wouldn't have thought this needed spelling out, really, but the blade is like a stopper in the wound. Remove it and a serious hemorrhage will occur. In other words, a medic would need to be present before any attempt was made to withdraw the blade. Doing it without thinking would be madness. You just can't do it. Oh, well, thank you for such a thorough explanation. You see, Counsel, when you act without thinking, the result is a bloodbath. Back to the witness testimony, please. That's basic knowledge that any medical research assistant with an ounce of sense ought to know.
Hold it!
In that case, there's an obvious explanation here. Which is... Clearly, the defendant, Raymond Bami-san, does not possess an ounce of sense. Das ist nicht sehr hilfreich. What do you think about that, Professor Mikotoba? I'm not sure that you should be labeling your best friend as lacking in common sense. Well, I thought it would be better than labeling her as a murderer. I don't know young people today. If that's friendship, I don't understand it. Careful, Counsel. A lack of common sense can be a very dangerous thing. Oh dear, that we call it only rather badly. That's life, I'm afraid. A lesson everyone must learn. Hopefully you can see now that this is really basic medical knowledge. Being involved in medical research, Mbami-san would certainly have been aware of it. In other words, there's no good reason why the defendant would have tried to pull the knife from the victim.
Hold it!
But the defendant had suddenly encountered somebody she knew lying on the ground, bleeding to death. The sight could have shocked her delicate sensibilities, causing her to remove the blade inadvertently. I really don't think inadvertent actions can explain this. Inadvertent. Unbeabsichtigt, ungewollt, okay. The woman is a medical research assistant. I can't imagine she would behave so irrationally. Oh, but irrational behavior is a woman's prerogative, isn't it? Ganz dünnes Eis hier. Ganz dünnes Eis. Oh dear, you have a lot to learn about women. Only a small-minded man could have such bigoted views. Oh dear, perhaps I'm letting my male persona take hold a little too much. Well, have I managed to convey the basics now? That should cover the medical side of the argument. Let's not forget that the young student did have a motive for killing the victim.
Hold it!
Whatever the motive, it just isn't in Bami-san's nature to do something so awful. But she had both motive and opportunity. That's very hard to argue against. But you don't know the defendant.
Objection!
And you, Counsel, do not appear to know the law. Yes, evidence is the only way to convince the court of your argument, not feelings. With this, fleshling to defend her, I would almost say I pity the accused. So do I. Inspector, you will reiterate your point about the defendant's motive, please. Ah, yes. Miss Brett was in many ways the sworn enemy of Membani-san. The man the victim murdered 9 months ago, Dr. Wilson, was the defendant's highly respected mentor.
Hold it!
Well, yes, that's true. Dr. Wilson recognized Membami-san's talent and offered her the position of assistant despite her being a woman. She was extremely grateful to him. Yes, the Englishman appears to have been a very broad-minded individual. Okay. Dr. Wilson had no time for outdated traditions. He met with opposition, of course, but he believed firmly in Membami-san's abilities. Clearly, the defendant was in the man stabbed, which only serves to prove my point. Oops. Falscher Knopf gedrückt. This is hopeless. I can't find a single crack in this testimony anywhere. If Ray knew that withdrawing the knife from the wound would threaten Miss Brett's life further, I just can't think of any way to explain why she did it. Susato, it's at times like these when it's especially important to remember the fundamentals. The fundamentals? Evidence is what counts in the courtroom, isn't it? Of course, but I've been through the court record dozens of times already. I think perhaps you're forgetting something though. You needn't take the evidence at face value. You can and must examine it in greater detail too. Ah! I realize this is your first time playing the role of a lawyer in the courtroom. So if you need reminding of the rudiments, you need only ask, if I'll do my very best to help. Examine the evidence in the court record. It's an idea, certainly. What should I do? I know what to do. Come to think of it, Kazuma-sama and Naruhodo-san were always turning evidence over and over in their hands. Yes, I need to examine things in greater detail with A. Okay, dann machen wir das mal. Aber hier haben wir ja schon alles gelesen. Okay. Hier irgendwas? Wahrscheinlich auch nicht, ne? Hier der Traumsaft natürlich. Aber sonst sehe ich hier nichts Auffälliges. Oh, hier ist die... Lol, jetzt kann man die... Als ob. Walkers England... Was heißt Walkers? Walkers. Rau. Lärmen. Walkers, okay. England Returnee Tell All. This is the interview with you and Soseki-san, is it, father? It looks as though it was quite an exchange. Yes, he became a little over-animated when he was talking about his time in England. The photographer managed to capture the moment his hand karate chopped me on the neck. I do hope you weren't hurt. Oh man. Okay. Lol. Ist das hier das Zeichen von dem Restaurant? Von dem, wie hieß es nochmal? La Carnival, genau. Wo der erste Fall gespielt hat. So, und wenn wir jetzt hier das umdrehen, dann ist da doch bestimmt irgendwas. Dann ist da doch bestimmt irgendein Plot-Twist. Gucken wir uns das an. Okay. Scheinbar nicht. This is a newspaper from Soseki-san. There seems to have been an important article on the back page as well. Exclusive. Deadly poison stolen from Yumei Medical Research Laboratory. Deadly poison? Sagt nicht, dass das QRE ist. From Yumei's Medical Research. Father, isn't that your lab? What the... Let me see that. The poison's been stolen. It's this morning's paper that Soseki-san gave us. Are you saying you didn't know? As embarrassing as that is for the head of the laboratory, I didn't. I've not heard any such thing. Where on earth could the reporter have gleaned his information? Come to think of it, there was no article mentioning the story in our paper this morning, was there? It's a highly toxic poison we've been working on in the strictest confidence. I put Ray in charge of the project. Ray, she was managing it? If what's written here is true, it means that she tried to hide the theft from me. And moreover, the details were leaked somehow. I don't believe it. We need to read this article very carefully. The article about the poison has been entered into the court record. An article about poison that was stolen from a laboratory at Yuma University. Even my father, who is responsible for the lab, knew nothing of the incident. Okay. Gucken wir uns den Pen nochmal an. Was ist das? Oh lol. If we take off the pen's lid. Okay. Now let's unscrew the barrel, shall we? Okay. This must be the little reservoir that holds the ink. Yes, you fill it by drawing ink from a bottle up through the nib. Is something wrong, Father? Just as there doesn't actually appear to be any ink in there, that's all. Oh yes, you're right. It's pretty much empty. Well, it could be on the verge of running out, I suppose. The details of the fountain pen have been updated in the court record. A fountain pen bearing the initials RM that has a small reservoir inside into which ink can be drawn. There is a very small amount of liquid still inside. Und hier RM. The RM initials are very clearly engraved here. And the fact that Miss Brett was clinging to this pen in her dying moments is very clearly a message too. To identify a killer, you mean? I don't think there can be any doubt this is a key piece of evidence in this case. Wayman Barney, okay. Das ist schon keiner Sass hier, ne? Dass hier sowas ist. Dass da auch eine Flüssigkeit drin ist. Poison-Artikel. Exclusive. Deadly poison stolen from Yumei Medical Research University. Following a lecture at Yumei by Suseki Natsume on 11th August, it's come to light that a very disturbing incident took place. A deadly poison being secretly developed in the university's forensic science laboratory was stolen. Deadly in tiny quantities. Even the smallest amount entering the body, either via the mouth or via the wound from a poison-laced blade, would prove fatal in minutes. Current methods cannot detect the newly developed chemical. The university would have to be consulted. Why is the poison being developed? Onset of symptoms occurs in minutes, starting with impaired breathing and ending with acute contraction of the pupils prior to death. Also die Pupillen verschmälern sich. Ja, dann ist es ja klar, ist sie von dem Gift gestorben oder nicht? Such symptoms would be suggestive of this toxin. It's apparently an entirely new synthesis of alkaloids and rumored to have been commissioned by the military. Was sind Alkaloids? Alkaloids? Alkaloids. Alkaloide, okay. Commissioned by the military. Also Alkaloide, keine Ahnung, was das ist. Aber interesting. Und Contraction of the Pupils. Das wird doch gleich hier gesagt. Pupil constriction was observed in the victim in both eyes. I need to examine things in greater detail with ... Okay. Ah, by the look in your eyes, I see it's coming back to you. Go through the court record again and have a thorough look at everything. You may just find a clue. Haben wir ja schon. Gut. Pulling a blade from a wound without thinking could cause heavy bleeding. That's basic knowledge that any medical research assistant with an ounce of sense ought to know. In other words, there's no good reason why the defendant would have tried to pull the knife from the victim. Let's not forget that the young student did have a motive for killing the victim. Wo müssen wir das präsentieren? There's no good why they would have tried to pull a knife from the victim. Gute Frage. So. Erstmal kurz speichern. Vielleicht wegen dem Poison?
Objection!
Ja, als ob! No, there is one possibility. One very good reason why the defendant might have decided to withdraw the knife from the victim's wound. What? Ha! The yokel not only has a poor grasp of the law, but is also a poor loser. Tell us then, what possibility do you think you've identified? It's here. in this newspaper article. An article about the deadly poison having been stolen from a laboratory at the Imperial Humane University.
Objection!
The victim perished from a stab wound. Poison has no relevance in this case. But, Prosecutor Auchi, you will let the defense speak. But a newspaper article. The court cannot rely on the kind of hearsay those wretched publications carry. Counsel for the defense. I am going to need some tangible basis for your claim. You will indicate to the court precisely what part of the newspaper article mentioned affirms your assertion. Your Excellency. Yes, of course. Thank you. Wayne would never have done something to further endanger Miss Brett's life without just cause. The reason why the defendant pulled the knife from the victim's body is explained in the article where it says, why is the poison developed, glaube ich. Yeah. Why is the poison being developed? According to the article, the development of the poison was requested by the military. Yes. A troubling revelation indeed. Oh, it's very worrying. And yet, even more worrying, is how this yokel is trying to manipulate the court. Manipulate, with nothing more than rumors. Ah! But I feel sure Wei had a good reason for her actions. And I feel sure that the explanation is somewhere in this newspaper article. Hä? Hä? Aber da ist doch die Connection, oder nicht? Da ist doch die Connection, oder nicht? Hä? Following a lecture, a deadly poison being secretly developed in the university's forensic science laboratory was stolen. A poison-laced blade. Oh, ach so. Ach so. Okay, also von einer in Gift getrunkenen Klinge. Okay, dann das zweite. Deadly in tiny quantities. The article reveals the following property about the poison in question. When the toxin enters the body on a knife laced with the poison, it's rapidly absorbed and causes death in minutes. Are you suggesting if the knife used to attack Miss Brett was laced with this very poison, it would explain why the defendant, Membami-san, would have withdrawn the blade as soon as possible? Yes, the truth is, it was an attempt to stop the poison from entering the victim's body. What? Objection! Mir ist gerade eine Möglichkeit in den Kopf gekommen. Was sie auch, wer sie auch getötet haben könnte. Tatsächlich. Eine plausible Möglichkeit. Eine sehr plausible Möglichkeit eigentlich, wenn man die Umstände bedenkt. Ich sag's noch nicht. Wenn's soweit ist, sage ich's vielleicht, aber ich sag's noch nicht. Not at all. The defendant withdrew the knife blade from the victim's body, not to accelerate the woman's demise, but to save her life, and the prosecution cannot deny the possibility. Have you not read the post-mortem report? The cause of death was hemorrhage. The word poison appears nowhere in the document. Well, that's because by acting quickly to remove the blade, the defendant prevented the poison from taking hold. Objection! Oh, please, this is clearly desperation. The reason is last breaking of wind. Poison has nothing whatsoever to do with this case, as I believe the defense is well aware. We have no proof that the information in the Swatch newspaper article is at all reliable anyway. In that situation, what the student should have done is wait for medical assistance to arrive. But instead, you claim he suspected poisoning and took the potential lethal decision to remove the blade. She must have had a strong reason for her suspicions then, or the argument makes no sense. Exactly. Well put, Inspector. On what grounds did she do it, Jocke? Why did Ray suspect the stolen poison was involved? Wegen der Augen von Giselle. Wegen der Augen von Giselle Brett. If you want grounds, I'll give you grounds. What? You can't possibly... From your expression, Counsel, it would appear those are not empty words. But naturally, as you stand in this courtroom as a lawyer, you must be aware that words alone, empty or not, are of no value in our modern justice system. The court demands evidence. Yes, Your Excellency, I'm well aware of that. I've seen it many times, from my place at his side in the Old Bailey. In that case, Counsel, you will present the proof of the court now. What evidence demonstrates a clear link between this case and the poison in the newspaper article? The post-mortem report. I would ask the court to refer to the notes section of the post-mortem report, which reads, extreme meiosis, pupil constriction, was observed in the victim. Ah! Clearly, being a yokel with no knowledge of forensic science, I have no idea, so please do tell me. Presumably, the fact that this condition of the victim was noted in the post-mortem report means it's an unusual symptom of death. Well, under normal circumstances, the pupil is delayed when someone dies. Delayed vergrößern? Delayed. Erweitern, okay. If there was extreme constriction instead, that's most certainly unusual, yes. What are you doing, you yokel detective? In the newspaper article, there's the following information about the stolen poison. Onset of symptoms occurs in minutes, ending with acute contraction of the pupils prior to death. What? If the defendant, upon seeing the victim stabbed in the back, happened to notice that the pupils of Miss Brett's eyes had constricted severely. Yes, as a medical research assistant, she would have suspected poison immediately, without doubt. Prosecutor Auchi, I think you'll agree. This is very compelling evidence. You... Yoke student and Yoke professor! I believe the defense has expertly demonstrated a credible reason for the defendant's actions. No. Eugene Mikotoba. Yes, Your Excellency. I believe you are best placed here to confirm or deny the veracity of the defense counsel's argument. You will tell the court the truth about the details reported in this newspaper, please. It pains me to have to admit it, but I'm afraid I don't know. You don't know? The toxin was kept under lock and key in my laboratory, certainly, but I was unaware of any theft. Do you mean to tell the court that the reports of the theft are unfounded? No, Your Excellency. Without returning to the laboratory to investigate myself, I couldn't say. Ha! Listen to the bumbling academic. Unaware of the theft of secret state research from his own workplace until he reads of it in the newspaper. I take full responsibility for the incompetence of my supervision. Father. A pitiful situation for a university professor. You should have more control over your students, rather than allowing them off on killing sprees. That's totally unfounded. Oh! None of this is Professor Mikotoba's fault. It's all my fault. Wait. Mabami-san, you stand accused here. Outbursts like this will not be tolerated. But it was me. I was the one who noticed that the poison we were developing had been stolen that day. What? So you knew? I'd been placed in charge of overseeing the project. It was the day that the professor and Tsushiki-san were interviewed together for the newspaper. That's when I noticed that some of the poison was missing. Just a tiny amount it was. Why didn't you let me know immediately? I was scared. The whole project was supposed to be confidential, but some of the toxin had somehow been taken. So I decided I'd try to get it back before anyone else found out. Because I had a very good idea who the thief was. The thief? You don't mean Josiah Brett? Yes, of course. It was that dainty Englishwoman. Miss Josiah Brett. That's why I decided to join the little group of people going to the seaside. Inside the beach hut, I confronted Miss Brett. But she just sat on a stool at the back of the hut, smiling sweetly at me as if she knew she was untouchable. I know it was you who stole the poison. Where now? Whatever do you mean? And then, she suddenly got to her feet, before falling to her knees in front of me and then collapsing on the floor. That's when I saw the knife in her back. I couldn't understand what had just happened. And then, a moment later, I was seized with fear. Moment mal. In her back? Single deep from behind. Oh, okay. Dann, ich dachte, es wäre von vorne, aber es ist dann doch von hinten. Okay. And then, a moment later, I was seized with fear. The pupils of her eyes had shrunk to tiny pinpoints. I don't believe it. In other words, you realize that the victim was suffering the effects of the stolen poison. My mind started racing. I hadn't seen anything past Miss Brett's lips whilst I'd been with her, which left only one possibility way for the poison to have entered her body. On the blade of the knife in her back. And that train of thought was what spurred you to withdraw the blade. Yes, if the amount that had entered the bloodstream was small enough, she might still have a chance. That's what I hoped. Really, I'm so sorry for staying silent all this time. Okay. Your attempt to hide the truth of what happened is not something that can be overlooked. However, I have duly noticed the courage with which you confessed in the end. Thank you, Your Excellency. It's barely perceptible, but I do think the balance has shifted a little here, in this courtroom now.
Objection!
Your Excellency, do not be deceived. The victim just collapsed before your eyes, you say? Well, Mambami-san, if that is the case, perhaps you could explain how Miss Brett came to be stabbed. Well, you have no answer because the simple truth is that you stabbed the victim motivated by revenge.
Objection!
But you have no conclusive evidence to prove that assertion, do you? Oh, I have evidence, and it's very much conclusive. What's the prosecution counsel up to? It was brief, but he hesitated for a moment there. I'm almost sure of it. You will produce the aforementioned evidence at once, Prosecutor Aoshi. Perhaps some praise is due, young Yoke student. What? I had imagined there would be no need for me to submit this evidence. But you've brought this on yourself. What the... Aber man kann doch auch argumentieren, dass sie es da rauszieht, oder nicht? Could a more damning shot exist? The cruelty in the air on that beach is almost palpable. This evidence, more than any other, reveals the true extent of the accused's murderous nature. For it shows the precise moment that Mbami-san plunged the dagger into the victim's back. No, that's not true. No. I don't believe it. Ah! Order! 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 Counsel for the defense. Was it you who was responsible for that shrill scream that just pierced my courtroom? Perhaps his voice has yet to break. These yokers are slow of mind and slow to mature. Okay. I'll show you who's slow to mature. Careful now, Susato is starting to show her face here. It is often said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and here we have ample proof. The court will accept this extremely cogent photographic print as evidence. The incriminating photograph has been entered into the court record. A photographic print taken at the moment the victim was attacked. My friend Ray can be seen kneeling over Miss Brett. Aber wer hat das Foto gemacht, ist die Frage. I can't believe he's had a photograph like that up his sleeves the entire time. Gucken wir uns das nochmal an. Man sieht leider nicht, ob sie einen Stift schon in der Hand hat oder nicht. Gucken wir uns das nochmal an. Okay, warte. Okay, never mind. Ich dachte, sie hätte eine Maske auf, aber hatte sie nicht. I can't believe he's had a photograph like that up his sleeves the entire time. It's just a stark image. I'm genuinely lost for words. Wait a minute. I don't understand. How did you... I mean, who took that photograph? Wait.
Objection!
That's of no importance here. Stop trying to divert attention. Es ist... Ich würde sagen, es ist schon of importance. Mich würde es sehr interessieren, wer das gemacht hat. Oh!
Objection!
That's an absurd thing to say. It's crucially important. Whoever took this photographic print was a witness to Miss Brett's death. The court must be allowed to hear this person's testimony. Ah! I will oppose the defense's demand. The prosecution will reveal the identity of the person responsible for taking this photograph at once. Well, I'm afraid I can't do that. Pardon? You see, this print arrived at the Imperial Police Bureau headquarters by express post yesterday, but there was nothing to indicate the sender's name or address. The provenance of the print is unknown. Goodness! Are we to understand then, counsel, that in full knowledge of the fact that this photograph is the murkiest of origins, you nevertheless believe it fit for submission as evidence in the Supreme Court? When you first produced that print before, I noticed that you hesitated for a brief moment. Because you knew that it wasn't completely reliable evidence, didn't you? Silence! You yoke student and blabbering professor! What matters is the blatant truth that this print so eloquently expresses. But the defendant has already admitted to pulling the blade from the wound. Clearly this isn't the moment that the knife was plunged into the victim's back, but the moment it was withdrawn. Don't waste this court's time with your ramblings. Indeed, without knowledge of who produced this print, we have no means of verifying the claim. And and the scene it captures is without doubt the most compelling evidence presented to the court. As the defense is unable to shed any further light on the matter, I believe the conclusion is clear. Oh no! Susato, this is the time for you to fight. If what you've established so far is true, then there can be no doubt. This photograph shows the moment that Ray withdrew the blade from the victim. Yes, we just need to prove that somehow. Haha, you have plenty of time to rue your defeat on the slow train back to the provinces. And to rue the day you came up against Takatsushi Aochi in a court of law. Was heißt du rue? Rue. Bereuen, okay. If I can't determine who took this photograph, then the trial is going to come to an end. There must be a clue somewhere. There must be some way of working out who took it. Well, Counselor. Your Excellency, the burning question is who took that photograph, and the truth is... gute Frage.